My son said, "Mom, we're selling your house to save our business. You just need to sign." I smiled and said, "Okay." They had no idea the house already belonged to my granddaughter. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 72 years old. For the past 42 years, I've lived in the same beautiful three-bedroom Victorian house on Maple Avenue. This is where I built a life with my husband Richard, where we raised our two sons, Michael and Daniel, and where every corner holds a memory. Richard passed away 8 years ago from a heart attack. Since then, this house has become my entire world, my garden, my books, my sanctuary. Michael is the older son, successful IT consultant, married, 2 kids. Daniel is the younger one, always the struggling and sensitive one. He runs a small software startup that's been teetering on the edge of collapse for the last 2 years. No wife, lives alone. Everything changed when Daniel started talking about how his startup was about to go under. Suddenly, both sons were visiting more often. At first, the conversations were casual. "Mom, the house is getting too big for you. Maintenance is expensive. Property taxes, heating bills. If you downsized, you'd be so much more comfortable." I'd laugh it off. Then came talk of reverse mortgages. Then assisted living. Michael would say, "Mom, we're worried about you, a woman living alone in such a big house." Daniel would get teary-eyed and add, "What if something happens to you?" I'm 72, not 90. I still do yoga, teach reading to kids at the library, and video call my granddaughter Emma every week, Michael's 19-year-old daughter away at college. But they started treating me like I was frail, confused, and helpless. Then, one October afternoon, both sons showed up together. Michael was carrying a folder. Daniel looked like he'd been crying. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said gravely. They sat in my living room, the same room where I used to read them bedtime stories. Michael opened the folder. "Daniel's startup is sinking. If he doesn't get $300,000 soon, it's over. We've been thinking, your house. If we sell it, we can save the business, and we'll get you a beautiful apartment, a much better place, secure, with a community." Daniel hung his head and whispered, "Mom, I'm so ashamed to even ask, but this is our last option." I sat quietly for a moment, then I asked, "And if I say no?" Michael's voice hardened. "Mom, you can't manage this big house alone anymore. We're thinking of your well-being. Just sign and we'll handle the rest." I smiled and said, "All right, boys, I'll sign." Their eyes lit up. They were shocked at how easily I agreed. But they didn't know the house they wanted to sell wasn't in my name anymore. 2 years before Richard died, we set up an irrevocable living trust on the advice of our estate attorney. The house was transferred into the trust, and the sole beneficiary was my granddaughter, Emma. I'm just the trustee. I can live here for the rest of my life, but I can't sell it without Emma's consent. And when Emma turned 18, we both agreed this was the right decision, because deep down, I knew what my sons were capable of. By saying yes, I gave them enough rope to hang themselves. In the following days, they were ecstatic. Michael contacted a realtor. Daniel started telling investors that funding was on the way. They even took me to see apartments, a small one-bedroom in a senior living community. "Mom, you won't feel lonely here," they kept saying. I went along with it all, quietly watching. Then, one day, Michael showed up with papers. "Mom, just sign this power of attorney and quitclaim deed. We'll take care of everything else." I read them carefully. They wanted me to remove the house from the trust and transfer it into their names. I smiled again. "Sweetie, I need a little time. I want to run this by my attorney first." Their faces changed instantly. "Attorney? Mom, we're your sons. Why do you need a lawyer?" I replied calmly, just to be safe. The next day, I called Janet, my old friend and former elder law attorney. She and Richard had been law school classmates. "Eleanor, what's going on?" I told her everything. Janet laughed. "Good thing you set up that trust. Now let's see what they do next." The following week, a realtor showed up to appraise the house. Michael had sent him. The realtor asked, "Mrs. Hanson, are you really selling?" I said, "No, my sons are under a misunderstanding." When the realtor left, Michael stormed in, furious. "Mom, you embarrassed us." I stayed calm. "Michael, the house can't be sold. It's in a trust and the beneficiary is Emma." Both sons went pale. "What? When? Why?" Daniel shouted. "Because I knew one day you'd try exactly this." Michael snapped, "Mom, that's cruel. We're your sons. What right does Emma have?" I looked at him steadily. "Emma never asked me for money. You did." After that, the storm really hit. They started calling me incompetent. Michael threatened to seek guardianship. Daniel claimed I had dementia. They even brought in a geriatric specialist to assess my living situation. But Janet was ready. We documented everything: emails, texts, the realtor visit, the doctor's appointment. The case went to court. The judge reviewed my medical reports. My personal doctor confirmed I was completely sound of mind. My bank records, all bills paid on time, investments healthy, and testimonials from the library. I still teach classes regularly. Then Janet presented the trust documents. The judge looked at my sons and said, "This appears to be a clear case of attempted financial exploitation. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to Adult Protective Services for investigation." Daniel's startup collapsed. Investors pulled out when they learned the funding was a lie. Michael's company found out he'd been distracted by personal matters during work hours and issued a formal warning. Both sons eventually sent apologies, but it was far too late. I updated my will. The value of the house will now go to a charity that helps elderly victims of financial abuse, not to Emma directly, and certainly not to my sons. Emma will receive my separate savings, which are more than enough. Now I'm still in my house. I renovated the kitchen, added a beautiful sunroom where I read and watch the garden. My library classes are fuller than ever. I teach seniors how to protect their assets from exploitation. My sons never contacted me again. Maybe out of shame, maybe out of anger. I have no regrets. This is my story. My sons tried to take my home from me, and in the end, I gave them nothing. Would you have forgiven them, or would you have done the same as me? If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. And remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself. My daughter said, "Mom, we're putting you in assisted living and selling the house to fund our dream wedding for your grandkids." I just nodded and said, "That sounds lovely." She had no idea the house was already in a trust for a women's shelter. My name is Beatrice, but everyone calls me Bea. I'm 74 years old, and for the last 45 years, I've lived in the charming Craftsman Bungalow on Oak Street in Portland, Oregon. This is the house where I raised my only daughter, Claire, after her father left us when she was 6. It's where I planted the rose garden that blooms every spring, where I hosted book clubs and holiday dinners, and where every wall is covered with photos of a life I built on my own. Claire is 48 now, married to Mark, a mid-level marketing manager with 2 teenage kids, Lily and Noah. They live in a trendy loft downtown that's always one paycheck away from feeling cramped. Claire has always been ambitious, the kind of woman who pins dream boards on Pinterest and talks about manifesting abundance. Lately, though, those dreams have gotten expensive.
It started innocently. Claire began dropping by more often, usually with Mark in tow. They'd comment on how much work the house must be. "Mom, the roof looks like it needs repairs. The yard is a lot for you now. Have you thought about a smaller place with no stairs?" I'd smile it off and offer them coffee. I'm 74, not helpless. I still tend my roses, lead the neighborhood knitting circle, and volunteer at the local women's shelter every Tuesday. Then the real conversations began. Claire sat me down one rainy November afternoon, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, we have the most wonderful plan. Lily and Noah are getting older, and Mark and I want to give them the wedding of their dreams someday. Something big, beautiful, memorable. But venues these days, they're in